This is Censor Studio, and I'm Jang Sik Im. Currently, the war in Ukraine has been going on even longer than the Korean War. Even now, casualties continue to occur. But what would happen if the war in Ukraine were to reach a ceasefire at this point? Well, let's take a look right away. But before that, it seems that 70% of our viewers still haven't subscribed. I think it's time to hit that subscribe button. Please click subscribe just on... How would a ceasefire work if both sides made all possible concessions? The main clause likely to arise is freezing the currently occupied territories. Under the agreement, Russia would keep control of Donetsk, Luhansk, and parts of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson along current front lines. Next, a demilitarized zone is established. A buffer zone like Korea's military demarcation line would be set up, with both sides pulling their forces back. This demilitarized zone would likely be monitored by a United Nations observer team or a neutral observer group, thoroughly overseeing the introduction of weapons, military provocations, and covert troop movements. Ukraine might be barred from joining NATO. Russia started this war mainly to stop NATO's eastward expansion, so they won't back down on that issue. Ukraine will get security guarantees from the United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany rather than join NATO. If Russia breaks the ceasefire and invades again, these countries promise possible military intervention. Another key provision is fully returning all civilians abducted during the war. Thousands of soldiers and hundreds of civilians were forcibly displaced or detained during the war. To uphold the armistice, all must be returned to their home country without exception. These seem to be the terms that would be achieved if a ceasefire were to take place under the current circumstances. Most likely, President Zelensky of Ukraine will not be able to attend the ceasefire talks. It will probably be just Russia, the United States, and Europe reaching an agreement. Currently, Ukraine is rejecting this kind of ceasefire itself, mainly because of the clause that would hand over territory to Russia. That's why Ukraine is firmly refusing. They'll likely proceed with the ceasefire despite Ukraine's position, much like what happened to Korea in the Korean War. In fact, the war in Ukraine has been going on for over 3 years, and it's a conflict that has caused major upheaval in the international situation. However, even if the war in Ukraine ends, it seems unlikely that the deep tensions spread across the world right now will be easily erased. Europe will likely continue rearmament despite a Ukraine ceasefire. They might see it as an even bigger threat. Europe and Ukraine still firmly reject ceasefire talks tied to territorial concessions. That's how directly they feel the threat from Russia. The 3 Baltic states and Finland are rapidly rearming due to fears of a possible Russian invasion in the coming years. Poland seems to feel this threat directly as well, and recently, for the first time in decades, they're planning to create a safety guide with instructions on what to do in case of war. On July 21st, the Polish government will release a 40-page safety guide booklet to citizens. This booklet explains how to get clean water, respond to air raids or blackouts, and locate air raid shelters. Poland plans to distribute this booklet by September, and English and Ukrainian versions will also be distributed. They plan to print and distribute copies to all 14 million households across Poland. Also, Poland's current defense budget amounts to 4.7% of its gross domestic product. This is a high peacetime figure, ranking 7th worldwide. Russia, ranked 5th, spends 7.1%, while Israel, ranked 2nd, spends 8.8%. These two countries are actually in real war situations, so their high percentages are somewhat understandable. However, Poland is not officially a country at war, so the fact that it maintains this level of defense spending means that it feels a significant sense of crisis. Even if the Ukraine war ends in a ceasefire, the situation will persist. Instead, they may invest more in military strength, fearing they could be targeted next. Of course, Russia will also continue to maintain and invest in its military power. Currently, Russia's economy is running mainly around the defense industry. According to the Bank of Finland Institute for Emerging Economies, at least 40% of Russia's gross domestic product growth has come from war-related production. If Russia halts its defense industry, its economy will face even greater challenges. Even though a ceasefire has been reached, the international community's economic sanctions have not been lifted. Therefore, it seems likely that Russia will continue to maintain its military power. But you might ask whether Russia will just leave all that military equipment unused, and I don't think that's gonna happen either. First of all, Russia's modern war strategy is about maintaining complete control over Ukraine, and as long as that doesn't change, there's still a strong possibility that they could start another war against Ukraine in the future. An armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine seems likely within a few years. And right now, Azerbaijan is acting very hostile toward Russia. Armenia and Azerbaijan reportedly ended their conflict by establishing the Trump route via the Lachin corridor. And Azerbaijan has openly taken Ukraine's side as well. They also showed an aggressive stance by arresting journalists from media outlets supported by the Russian government. Signs of separation keep appearing in the Caucasus, and Russia can't allow it. Russia may feel Azerbaijan needs to be addressed. So after the war in Ukraine comes to a ceasefire, another war might break out in the Caucasus region. Since Azerbaijan's ally is Turkey, we'll have to wait and see. This region is likely to see power conflicts, which I find interesting. North Korea and Russia's relationship may grow more distant but won't fully break. Currently, the relationship between North Korea and Russia is more about Russia trying to rely on another country's power in the Ukraine war. This treaty wasn't made because Russia likes North Korea or wants to help them. With the Ukraine war at a ceasefire, North Korea and Russia will likely grow more distant temporarily, but their relationship will endure. First of all, Russia doesn't really trust China that much right now. They seem to be working together because they have a common enemy in the United States, but there's not a lot of trust between them. Because of this, Russia feels the need to keep China in check in the Far East, and most of Russia's ports in that region freeze over during the winter, so Russia needs a port that can access the Pacific Ocean. As a result, Russia's main ice-free access to the Pacific is through North Korean ports. In fact, Russia has previously leased Pier 3 at North Korea's Rajin port in the 2000s, so in the long term, Russia needs North Korea. So even if the war ends, they won't just abandon them or anything like that. They'll likely keep their current relationship but prioritize diplomacy with other countries over North Korea. North Korea understands it's risky to depend only on China for diplomacy. North Korea has long feared that China might absorb them at any time. North Korea allied with Russia partly to prevent China from taking over, as Russia's involvement could stop it. Above all, unlike China, Russia is providing strong support to North Korea, so even if their relationship becomes distant due to their own circumstances, it seems likely that Russia and North Korea will continue to maintain the current state of their relationship. So what stance will South Korea take toward Russia? Likely many South Korean companies will try investing there again. It won't be the same as before, but they'll still want to return to the Russian market. North Korea and Russia have grown closer because of the Ukraine war, so South Korea's main goal is to disrupt their strengthened ties. Currently, too much Russian military technology is flowing into North Korea, and a lot of military equipment is going into North Korea as well. South Korea will likely work to stop Russia from backing North Korea in the coming years. Another key point is that a ceasefire involves more than halting gunfire. The post-war reconstruction market will open after the war. Much of Ukraine is destroyed, and nearly all infrastructure like roads, railways, power grids, and housing must be rebuilt. Here, construction and energy companies from the United States and Europe will likely participate in large-scale projects, and China is also highly likely to promote an expanded version of the Belt and Road Initiative as a justification. China's low-cost infrastructure and long-term loans may lead to reconstruction competition with the West. In this way, reconstruction in Ukraine will likely continue for several years, and support and investment from the international community are also expected to continue. South Korea will likely pursue not only reconstruction, but also longer-term projects like building steel plants and bridges. In the end, a ceasefire is not only about ending the war, but it can also be the beginning of a new economic and diplomatic battle. After the ceasefire, Ukraine's politics will likely become turbulent. President Zelensky has been a charismatic wartime leader, but could face backlash in Ukraine if he accepts a ceasefire that cedes territory. Severe political conflicts can undermine the stability needed for post-war reconstruction. Since they probably couldn't hold elections during the war, I think they'll hold an election and another president might become the president of Ukraine. Inside Russia, Putin will claim victory, but over time, public dissatisfaction may grow due to sanctions and casualties. What do you think will happen if the war in Ukraine comes to a ceasefire? Please let us know in the comments. That's the end of the video. Thank you.